Welcome back, everyone, to Caffeinated Combat, where we are going to preview the UFC card on May 30th. We're going to talk about Francis. Welcome back, everyone, to Caffeinated Combat, where we are going to preview the UFC card on May 30th and talk about Francis Ngannou fighting Jon Jones and whether or not that is likely to happen. And unfortunately, it's not looking too likely. We had a couple tweets from both parties saying that the UFC wasn't really playing their ball game, not giving them enough money, and just not cooperating in general. So I think that UFC might want to keep them in their respective weight classes. But also, surprise, surprise, I didn't think it would happen. On May 30th, we are getting a UFC card. Now, if you take a look 2 weeks ago, you would notice that there was no fight scheduled. They didn't have a location at all. There was absolutely no evidence of a card whatsoever. And Uncle Dana, being the miracle worker that he is, he made it happen. He said he would. I didn't believe him, but he made it happen. And I'm really happy that we have another card and we don't have to wait till June 6th. So yeah, a lot of good things to talk about today. We'll go over that May 30th card and a little more about Francis Ngannou and Jon Jones.
Hey, look, Francis Ngannou, Jon Jones, probably not going to happen, but it's fun to speculate, is it not?
It
It
is.
looked really likely there for a hot minute, and then it just seemed to all fall apart. Big sad face. So, just to give a slight recap for anyone that hasn't been following the Jon Jones Francis Ngannou Twitter feud, and I can't blame you if you weren't, but Jon and Francis start going back and forth, and it looked like a move to heavyweight was all but certain for Jon. And Uncle Dana didn't seem too keen on it. And in the past, Jon himself has not seemed too keen on moving anywhere but light heavyweight. I mean, we see him have feuds and little Twitter squabbles with people all the time. He has them with Israel Adesanya or Stipe or Daniel Cormier or in this case Francis Ngannou or anyone at light heavyweight too. But this time it felt genuine. It felt real. It felt like both guys actually wanted it, and it was looking good. And then the UFC was like, hold up, you want money to fight? We ain't having that, kids. There will be no payment. There will be no compensation here. So now it seems like that fight is not going to happen. And I have a slight theory as to why this is. And this isn't just my theory. This is a popular theory right now. uh, I saw Ariel Helwani tweet something about it, and it was basically along the lines of, is the UFC going in a direction where they're not going to pay crazy amounts of money to any fighter because we're in a situation right now where they're losing their gate with the pandemic? So they only have their pay-per-view and their ESPN numbers to rely upon. They don't have the money from audiences coming to see the fights. Is there any legitimacy to that? I don't know. Do you think there's any truth to that, Matt? It seems a
I,
little far-fetched, but
I
I don't
mean,
know.
it definitely makes sense on paper when you look at how much they would make. I think that some of the arenas would have up most of like 20,000 seats in them, and the tickets aren't exactly cheap either. So if you do the math, they're definitely making a lot of money from that. But here's the flip side. So many more people are staying home right now. So many more people are watching UFC because there's no other sports on, unless you want to watch NASCAR or Korean baseball, like you were saying.
Hell yeah.
There's just not a lot on right now. So I feel like the offset would be the amount of views they're getting because of the pandemic. Understandably, though, the gate would probably still end up causing a negative reaction there. I imagine they're still losing money even with the newfound people watching.
Well,
And yeah.
it's surprising, but their viewership, if you look at the numbers, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but I have looked at them, and it's not significantly more. They have not. That's been a popular idea that because everyone is home and there's no sports on, people are going to watch MMA, and that hasn't exactly been true. Their numbers have stayed around the same. If you're a fan of MMA, you're watching it. If you're not, the coronavirus pandemic is probably not going to make you one. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I could see
So,
that.
yeah,
It's a
as
tough
far as,
sport to get into when you're thinking of people that aren't into it already. You know what I mean? So I do understand
yeah,
what you're saying there. Yeah.
especially now because like it's so the world is just in such a shaky place, and every time, while people like you and I are thrilled that MMA is back, of course every time we watch a card we are doing so kind of holding our breath because it's very concerning, and it's very there's just a lot of anxiety around it right now.
I
It's
agree.
it's
Yeah.
tough to get into a new sport right now, especially when you feel so uncertain about that. Again, I'm thrilled it's back and everything, but oh man, I'm just constantly waiting for the story to come out that's like, this fighter tested positive and he still fought anyway. That's like my biggest fear right now. I think that's everyone's biggest fear. Everyone in the
Yeah.
MMA community. Nobody wants that to happen. It was a real scary situation when Jacare Souza tested positive. Thankfully, the guy didn't, they caught it
Yeah.
before he actually went out there and fought or anything like that. So there's just so much anxiety right now that, yeah, I don't see people getting into MMA that weren't already into it. Now, with that being said, the UFC, I think, and this is a model that they live off of, that Dana is constantly promoting, it's the best fighting the best. And I feel like for the most part, that's always been true. They always do give us the best fighting the best. I mean, when was the last time you really wanted to see a fight like two guys were going back and forth all the time, and it was just a great matchup, there was a great little feud going on there, and you just didn't get it? Now of course Tony and Khabib, but they tried. Everyone in that
They did.
situation tried. Tony tried, Khabib tried, the UFC tried. It just shitty luck. That's all that stopped that. Just bad circumstances. But when was the last time there was any big fight seemingly starting to materialize and it just died?
Yeah.
When was the last time something like this happened? I mean, I I don't think it's wrong to say that the UFC does not fairly compensate their fighters. They definitely need to pay people more. And of course, there are some exceptions. There's one exception. He's a Irish guy. You may have heard of him. And but this is weird to me. This whole situation is weird with John and Francis, uh, to the point where I feel like we're missing something. Like there's a piece of this story that well, I mean, obviously, we haven't heard Dana's side of it yet. We haven't heard the UFC side. I'm just, this was all very weird to me. It feels like something is not, there's something more to this, I feel like, than just money. And maybe it is that they're worried about their gate, and financially they're taking a big hit right now. I don't know, but this is strange. Does it seem strange to you that this is simply a matter of pay, fighter pay? They're just not
Yes.
willing to pay these guys, and that's why it's not going to happen? It's very weird.
Well, I would like to add that this is a tough fight for both of them. And Dana White said it best when he was talking during a press conference, and he said that he didn't know whether or not Francis Ngannou or Jon Jones really wanted that fight. And I have to admit, if I were either of them, which I'm clearly not, but if I were, I would be very concerned fighting Jon Jones, fighting Francis Ngannou. These are killers out there, and they're probably requesting an asinine amount of money for it in the hopes, okay, well, I shouldn't say that they're probably doing this. This is one of my theories that I'm branching off of one of your theories here. They're probably asking for an asinine amount of money so that the UFC says no. But they're still going to ask for a lot. So if the UFC says yes, then they're still making a lot of money. That'll be worth it. It's just, I think it's worth too much to both fighters to do it for such a small amount of money or whatever the UFC is offering. Because I'm they made it sound like it wasn't a lot. So I almost feel like they're setting it up to not to sabotage it, but I can't say whether or not either fighter really wants this fight, because they are both, well, not both of them. Jon Jones is a talker. You were saying it earlier with Israel Adesanya, something like that. He has a lot of fights that don't materialize when he starts talking. But at this level of competition, you got to think that they're asking for just so much money. I don't know if the UFC could fairly compensate that, but I really would love to hear Dana White's side of it, because there's like you said, there's something missing here if that's not it.
Yeah,
What's going on? They are not, the UFC is not the type of organization to not make big fights, and the fact that they're not making this big fight is strange. I agree.
yeah. I will say they are the type of organization to not fairly compensate people, but I also think there's a lot of money to be made here, because this is a this is a mega fight, and there
Yeah.
is a lot of risk for both guys, which makes it interesting from an audience perspective, right? I mean, you have Jon Jones finally making that move to heavyweight and really cementing his legacy as the greatest of all time if he was to beat a guy like Francis Ngannou and then presumably go on to a title shot, right?
Right.
And then you have Francis Ngannou, the risk he takes, well, if he gets beat by Jon Jones, he goes way back in I don't want to say he goes way back in the heavyweight rankings, even though the rankings kind of don't mean anything a lot of the time. But he is very close to a title shot right now, very close. The only thing holding that up for Francis is Stipe and DC. Whatever is going on, there's a lot going on
There's a
there.
lot going on with that. Yeah.
Um,
That's tricky.
that's the only thing holding him back. But if he was to lose this fight to Jon Jones, now he gets pushed back a little farther in the line, because then not only do you have to wait for the Stipe and DC thing to fall through, you have to wait to now Jon is part of the picture, right? And he steps in front of you in line, not just because he beat you, but because he's the bigger star. Jon
Yeah.
is one of those guys that, well, maybe not so much in this particular case, but Jon is one of those guys that gets to call his shots, right? He is up there with Conor McGregor level of fame, where, yeah, I mean, they moved an entire card for him. When all the PED stuff was going down with the Gustafson fight, the second Gustafson fight, and they had to move it, and that whole mess. What happened? Jon Jones holds that kind of sway with the company. So if he comes into this heavyweight title picture, Francis gets pushed way back. And then if Francis was to win, well, Jon Jones' GOAT legacy, there's a black mark on that. And I ain't just talking about the mark, or Matt Hamill black
Ah,
mark.
too soon.
I almost said Mark Hamill. uh, he beat John fair and square. All right,
He did, yeah.
I'm waiting for the rematch. But yeah, there's a lot at stake for both guys. This is the biggest fight you can make right now. I mean, name another fight right now that is more sought after than this. Maybe Stipe DC3, but that doesn't seem like it's coming anytime soon,
No,
because Stipe does not
yeah.
want to fight while this pandemic is going on.
I can't think of a better fight besides obviously Tony and Khabib, but that's not going to happen. So this seems like the fight to make, and they might just be using this as leverage to make more money. You know how the business works. The fighters are going to do what they can to get the most money. It makes sense. So I think that the picture isn't necessarily over. It's not closed yet. I think that we could still make something out of this. We, as in the UFC and the fighters, not us. We can't. We don't have much say in it. So I
No,
think that there's
none.
definitely still a possibility that it could happen. But
Yeah, I'll be interested to hear what Dana says. I imagine after the May 30th card, or even before then, he'll be doing some interviews, and that's definitely going to be brought up.
oh yeah,
In fact, I would think that's going to be the biggest talking point right now. It's going to be when Dana is being asked questions by the media. It's going to be in relation to this May 30th card. It's going to be Tyron and Gilbert Burns coronavirus stuff, and Jon Jones and Francis Ngannou. That's the biggest. Those are the three biggest talking points right now. So we're gonna hear a lot in the coming week or so. So I'm looking forward to that. Now that we've talked about the promotional, the business side of it, the legacy side of it, what do you think? How do you think the fight goes? We haven't actually talked about the fight itself,
Right.
more so how it's going to happen and what it means. But how does it go?
That's a tough one. Because I feel like Jon Jones is a lot like Stipe Miocic in the way that he avoids damage, uses his wrestling defensively, and just strikes at a long distance away. So I feel like the fight would go in the direction that Stipe and Francis Ngannou went, where um, Francis is just constantly moving forward, pressuring and pressuring, and Jon is defensively picking him apart and using his wrestling to tire him out when needed. I can't ignore the possibility, though, that Francis just knocks him clean out,
Yep.
because Francis has two Ford Escorts on each hand and he hits so hard. You saw what he did to our boy Alistair Overeem. He
Yeah.
uppercutted him off the ground. That doesn't happen a lot now, does it? Can you think of a time when you've seen a fighter get uppercutted and his feet left the ground like that? Horrifying.
Maybe
Yeah.
Justin Gaethje, but it didn't seem to phase him
Oh,
too much
that was an
when
interesting. Yeah.
Tony hit him.
Yeah. So I would ultimately say that Jon would probably win the fight, just being extremely defensive and outpointing him. But you also have to understand this side of the coin. Jon, he looked very beatable in his last two fights against Thiago Santos and Dominic Reyes. He
Yes.
looked very, very defeatable, almost to the point where some people said that he lost those fights. And I wouldn't disagree. He
I think he lost the
definitely,
Dominic Reyes one.
yeah, I think he lost Dominic Reyes one. I think he won rounds 1 through 3. So it depends what Jon Jones is showing up, because the Jon, when he seemed to be in his prime, unbeatable. And maybe it was just a level of competition he was fighting, because Dominic Reyes and Thiago Santos, I mean, they're the best of the best. But I have to feel like Jon is degrading skill-wise just because of how he's looked in his past fights. But again, I mean, you could say that's just because of the competition. So it's hard to say. But I'm going to assume that a very defensive Jon shows up and Stipe Miocic is Francis Ngannou. And I know that sounds weird, but if you've seen what Stipe did to Francis, I think it would make more sense. I think he fights that way. What do you think would happen?
Well, I do think Francis has evolved a lot since the Stipe fight. I think the Stipe fight was one of the best things to ever. Well, there was the Stipe fight, and then there was the Derek Lewis fight, right?
Oh,
Did the Derek
yes.
Lewis fight come directly after the Stipe fight? Am I
It did,
right?
yes. That
Yeah.
was yeah.
Okay. So I think Francis has changed so much since those last two fights. I think his mental game has evolved. I think he has become I want to say he's become a much more tactical fighter, but I also can't say that for sure because he hasn't really gotten the opportunity to show any of it. He tells us he's much more tactical now than he was back then, and I do believe him. It's just the guy is knocking people out inside of one round. We have no time to see him, to see the evolution of his game. Now, like you said, Jon's offense has noticeably taken a decline. He is simply not the Jon Jones we've seen in the past. That's not to say he's still not as dominant as ever. I mean, he's still winning,
Yeah.
but his offense has definitely degraded a bit. His defense, however, is still very good, and he still knows how to move. He still knows how to pick people apart and use his range properly. Now, you mentioned his wrestling. We haven't seen a lot of his wrestling in these last few fights. Everyone thinks he's going to turn to his wrestling, but it just doesn't seem to happen. Now, whether that would happen in the Francis fight, I don't know. I mean, if it went to the ground, I think Jon would have a serious advantage over him. But I think he would struggle getting Francis to the ground because Francis is just such a big, strong guy. And I have to imagine that he would work on his takedown defense so much because obviously he wants to keep that fight on the feet. Francis he's basically the Deontay Wilder of MMA. He is by no means the most tactical fighter, and even if his skills have improved as of late, he's by no means the most tactical fighter. But he has that light switch. He could flip that switch at any moment, and nothing else matters. Nothing else his cardio, his wrestling, his fight IQ, none of that matters if he lands one of those big shots. Deontay Wilder, people constantly say he's not the best boxer in the world. Like he's definitely not. He doesn't have the best footwork. He doesn't have the best just boxing ability, but he has that crazy power where all that other stuff gets invalidated because he's able to end the fight in an instant. Francis, same exact way. So I agree that Jon obviously he could win. I agree that Jon would win that fight. I really do believe that. Francis, of course, could turn his lights out at any moment, but I do think Jon wins that fight because I think he could just outsmart him on the feet. I think he knows how to be elusive. He knows how to roll with those big shots. He's done it many, many times. I really don't believe at light heavyweight or heavyweight there's a man on this planet that beats Jon Jones. I really don't believe that. Of course, anyone, especially Francis, could land one of those massive shots at any moment, but will they? That's the question. I don't see that happening. But who knows? We may not even have to worry about any of that because the fight might not happen because the
That's a good
UFC
point.
doesn't want to pay the money. We'll see. But
There's
it's
one
fun
more.
to speculate.
Yeah, there's one more aspect of that too, and that's what will Jon Jones weigh in at? 240? Is that what he has said in the
Oh,
past? Because Francis cuts to get to 265, so he's walking around in the octagon maybe 275. And Jon's walk around weight, I thought he said was 240. So you also have a 35-pound advantage against Jon, but also a 35-pound disadvantage in terms of having to go 5 rounds. I don't think that Francis would survive 5 rounds with Jon. Imagine, imagine that. Francis does not have the cardio, especially
I,
with Jon pressuring you if you start to fade. I don't know how that
I
would go
think he
for
would
him.
survive, but I
You
think
think so?
I think he would survive the 5 rounds because he survived the 5 rounds with Stipe, and right, that went to decision, right?
Uh, I believe it did. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and that was a worse version of Francis Ngannou. I do think he survives the 5 rounds, but I think it's 5 rounds of Jon beating him up.
Yeah.
I think it looks a lot like the Anthony Smith or the Thiago Santos fight, where Jon isn't like destroying him. It's not like it's not competitive, but he's outpointing him,
And he's
and
playing it safe. Yeah.
he's playing it safe. You have to play it safe with a guy like Francis. You have to. He can't engage in a firefight with Francis because how that ends
That's a
for him.
scary. Rosenstruik would tell you how that ends. That's not fun.
That's what I'm saying, man. And it's so hard to talk about a fight like this because we have seen so much of one guy and so little of the other.
That's true. Yeah.
There is so much on Jon Jones. You could watch so much Jon Jones footage and really understand his game, or at least attempt to understand his game. But Francis, man, that's just not the case. And especially recently, we just haven't seen how much the guy has evolved. But it's still very fun to think about, and I hope in the next week or so this is something this has been a situation and a story that's evolving daily. So by the time this comes out, we might be talking a whole different game. This fight might be set in stone by then, or it might be completely thrown out the window. Who knows?
It's all up in
Only
the
Uncle
air at this
Dana.
point. Yeah.
Only Uncle Dana.
So, would you like to move to our UFC May 30th card where Tyron Woodley faces Gilbert Burns?
Yeah.
You think
The first thing I want to talk about with that is it going to be at the Apex? Because Nevada has still as far as I know, at the time of this recording, Nevada has still yet to confirm whether or not they are going to allow a sporting event to take place, because apparently they are going to make a final decision Wednesday, this coming Wednesday.
That is cutting it very close.
Yep.
That's scary. Oh
Yeah.
man, I thought they did make a decision already,
As,
but I guess not. No.
as far as I know, it's not 100% set in stone yet.
Yeah.
I mean, it looks good. Like, it looks like that's where it's going to be. Um, it might just be a formality at this point with the Nevada Athletic Commission. But
Yeah.
the thing to remember is that Nevada has done an excellent job at containing the coronavirus and handling this pandemic. They've been one of the most successful states in the country, uh, dealing with all the pandemic stuff. So it looks like they're letting sports come back. I mean, there's boxing events that they have planned and stuff like that. So I shouldn't say it's not up in the air. It seems more or less confirmed, but we have to wait till Wednesday to get the exact word. But as far as the UFC dealing with the coronavirus, I think there is no better place for them to go than Nevada and the UFC Apex.
I'd have to agree with you there. I think that what Dana White said earlier is that he was positive it would happen, but like you said, I guess it wasn't set in stone. So that's what it is. So maybe some people at the Nevada Athletic State Commission kind of told him like, it's not official, but you'll probably get in. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? That's probably what it was. But logistics aside, the fight itself is very interesting. Now, Gilbert Burns, you might not know who this fella is. Who is this guy? Did he just jump out of the bushes? Now he's fighting Tyron
Oh
Woodley.
man, he's a Brazilian
He's
badass.
he is. Here's some. He's a four-time jiu-jitsu world champion. He's 18-3, and he's on a 5-fight win streak against some notable competition. I think he has a very good chance of defeating Mr. Woodley. But Mr. Woodley, elephant in the room, coming off that really bad loss against Kamaru Usman. He got beat up for about
Over a
5
year
rounds.
ago too.
Yeah. Did he win a single round in that fight?
Mm, I don't think so, man.
I
I
don't
think
remember.
Usman just
Yeah.
dominated him.
Yeah.
That
That
was
was
one of the
bad.
most dominant performances we've ever seen in a title fight.
I would agree with you.
And here's the thing, man. He doesn't get credited for it as much as he should. Tyron is one of the most dominant welterweights in the division's history. He really is.
Yeah.
I mean, who has been a more dominant welterweight champion than Tyron Woodley that isn't named George St. Pierre?
No one.
I can't name him. The guy held the title for a hot minute, and then Usman just came in there and wrestled the shit out of him.
And
But
Tyron's a Division I wrestler too. We might want to add here. He's
terrific
not easy to
wrestler.
wrestle. So the fact that
Wrestler.
Kamaru did that is
Terrific
very interesting.
takedown defense, as we
Yeah.
saw in the Damian Maia fight. Some of the best takedown defense in the sport. And then Usman just had his way with them. But it's going to be interesting to see Tyron come back after all this time and after such a devastating loss. And I think he matches up well with Gilbert Burns. Gilbert is they have some similar styles to them. Gilbert, I think, is slightly more aggressive, and his striking is a little more wild, but he hits hard, man. He hits really hard for a welterweight. I mean, he cracks people and puts them down. Tyron as well. Tyron has that explosiveness, you know? He does like that shuffle where he just skates across the octagon and like charges at you.
He does.
It looks like his feet don't even leave the ground. He just glides and he throws a million punches. It's really weird to look at, but it's effective as hell. And they both have just terrific wrestling. I think Gilbert wins this fight. I think he's more aggressive, man. He fights so much more he's got like more savagery to him, you know?
Oh yeah.
Tyron tends to be a little more passive. He tends to be a little less forthright in his engagements. He he plays it safe. Now, the thing to remember is the Tyron performances we're thinking of, where he plays it kind of safe. The Damian Maia performances. That's when he was a welterweight champ, and he was doing everything he had to do to hold on to that title, and you can't blame him for that. But this is a Tyron Woodley that is no longer a champion. That's a Tyron Woodley we have not seen in some time. Do you think he fights differently now that he does not have that title to defend?
I think so. If you look back at when he didn't have the title, when he got it from Robbie Lawler, he he was definitely aggressive in that fight. He moved forward, he pushed Robbie back, and he hit him with that right hand, that signature Tyron Woodley right hand, and put him down. So he was definitely more aggressive. That was a different Tyron Woodley. But the thing is, with that right hand, if you saw Gilbert Burns' last loss to Dan Hooker, I know it was 2 years ago, just about, but Dan Hooker just he pieced him up on the feet, knocked him down twice, knocked him out cold. So you got to wonder how is he going to perform now against Tyron Woodley, a guy that I would say hits harder than Dan Hooker.
Was that at welterweight
I
when they fought?
That's my next point. That was at 155.
Okay.
So do you think that a guy that gets knocked out, I don't want to say so easily because Dan Hooker can knock anybody out, but it did look like he got knocked out pretty easily. So do you think that the 155 to 170 jump would help him in that regard? I feel like it would. Um,
The thing is, Gilbert gets into some brawls, right?
yeah.
That's very much his style, is to just get in a brawl. So yeah, I do think Tyron could clip him and put him down. Whether or not that happens, of course, who knows? But I will be interested. I think this is going to be a fight that goes to the ground,
You
honestly.
think so?
Yeah, I do. I think this is going to be a wrestling jiu-jitsu match. I don't think either guy. I think Gilbert is going to come out swinging, and then he's going to do some phone booth fighting with Tyron, and then he's going to go for a takedown. And yeah, I think this is a fight that goes to the ground. I don't think this is a striking match, and I think Gilbert just has some crazy jiu-jitsu. And I mean, we'll have to see how I really don't know what kind of Tyron Woodley we're going to see, because he's not a champion anymore. And it's been so long since we have seen Tyron Woodley not fight as a champion. And you know how these contenders fight. I mean, they fight like Gilbert Burns,
Yeah.
They might come off as a little reckless because they're so aggressive. I mean, look at the contender series, you have guys competing for contracts just to get into the UFC. They fight a little recklessly sometimes. And when they don't, put themselves out there and take some risks, they don't get their UFC contract. Now, I'm not suggesting that Tyron Woodley or Gilbert Burns are that caliber of fighter. They're much more elite than that. But I think we're going to see two guys. We're going to see a defeated, I shouldn't say a defeated Tyron Woodley, but a Tyron Woodley who is coming back after a devastating defeat. He's hungry, and Gilbert Burns is hungry. He's climbing that welterweight ladder. I think he's at like number 6 in the welterweight rankings. And both of these guys want to get into that title picture again. Well, for Tyron again, because right now, who are the big names at welterweight? It's not Tyron Woodley and Gilbert Burns. It's Kamaru Usman, obviously. It's Colby Covington. It's Jorge Masvidal. These are two guys that are going to want to go out there and make a statement to get back into title contention. So while I do think this is going to be a fight on the ground, I think it's going to be wild. I think it's going to – I don't think either guy is going to play it really safe. And if they do, I think the more aggressive guy is just going to take over. If Tyron plays passively like he did in the Damian Maia fight when he was a champion, I think Gilbert's going to swarm him. I think he's going to strike up with him. Then he's going to take him down. Then he's going to take his back. And he's going to sink in a rear naked choke. That's my prediction.
Something interesting with Tyron Woodley, he came out and said that he had this violent mindset that he never really had before in any of his fights. like you were saying, he's a very defensive champion. But now that he's a contender, he was saying he has this violent mindset. He really wants to hurt you. He really wants to go after you, to the point where he said that he was actually cursing at his sparring partners.
Oh
He
man.
seems very angry, very, you know what I mean? So I feel like he might make some mistakes here. He seems to be fighting a little emotionally, at least during sparring. Whether or not that goes his way, it's anybody's guess.
Think he's gonna
Um,
come out with that Cody Garbrandt
yeah,
style?
I think he might. But then again, I feel like Gilbert Burns is probably going to beat him the same way Kamaru did, just a little bit of a lighter version than that, a little bit more of a competitive version. I think Gilbert Burns is gonna strike with him. He's gonna pressure him. He's gonna push him up against the fence, get the clinch, and after he gets the clinch, he's gonna work for that takedown. And like you said, it should be a jiu-jitsu match if it goes Gilbert Burns' way. On the flip side of the coin, you could see Tyron Woodley fight Gilbert Burns the same way he fought Damian Maia, because for anyone who didn't watch Damian Maia fight Gilbert Burns, Gilbert was able to compete with him on the ground. And Damian Maia is one of the best, and I mean the best, jiu-jitsu and grapplers in the welterweight division. So I don't know if Tyron's going to want to wrestle or chance getting taken down by someone that could basically have the same skill set as Damian Maia. You saw how he fought Damian Maia. No chances there. Play on the outside. Take shots only when you are safe. But I think it's going to be this battle of Gilbert Burns pressuring, trying to get that takedown, like you were saying, and Tyron Woodley backpedaling, just trying to play it safe. Even though he's not a champion, he doesn't have to play it safe. I don't think he wants any of that ground game from Gilbert Burns. And if it goes that way, it's anybody's guess. That's just my prediction. I think that's very likely.
Yeah, another interesting thing to think about now too is Damian didn't or doesn't have the striking that Gilbert Burns has, right? Like you said,
Right.
Gilbert Burns was able to really compete on the ground with Damian Maia, and obviously Tyron does not want to go there. So in the Damian Maia fight, Tyron had the advantage of, as long as I don't get taken down by him, I could outstrike him, right?
Right.
He that's not necessarily something he could rely on here, because Gilbert, like I said, he hits hard for a guy at 170, and he will come at you, chin up and all. He
Smiling
will,
too.
yeah, smiling. So, this is a tough fight. This is a tough comeback fight for Tyron Woodley, and it will be interesting to see how this shakes out. And I'm very interested to see, no matter who wins, who do they call out after this? That I will be. How are they going to shake up the welterweight division? You know, because
I think, yeah.
it's very locked down right now with Usman, Covington, Masvidal. Those are
Leon
Leon
Edwards
Edwards
too.
too. Yeah, Leon Edwards.
That's competitive. That's death row right there. Those four. Oh.
Yeah. So I will be super interested to see either Tyron or Gilbert Burns, how they plan to shake up welterweight. Neither guy should ask for a title shot. Neither of them are in that position right now. No matter if whoever wins on May 30th, I don't think either guy should call out Usman. I think Leon Edwards or Covington. That's the next fight you gotta look at if you're Gilbert Burns or Tyron Woodley. After you go through that, then you call out the title.
Let's be honest here. If Tyron wins this fight, he's gonna ask for a title shot.
Yeah,
I really do think
he
so.
is.
He's gonna be very upset if he doesn't get a title shot.
Yeah,
Uh,
I get it,
I do too. Yeah.
because he was such a dominant welterweight champion. You know, I think he would have had good reason to ask for an immediate rematch. But here's the thing about that: whether or not he was a dominant welterweight champion, he got dominated in the Usman fight. You know, this is not like Dominic Reyes asking for an immediate rematch with Jon Jones, a fight that he arguably won. This is a fight where Kamaru beat him, and he beat him convincingly. You know, I think something like what Kamaru did to Tyron is more impressive than what Masvidal did to Ben Askren. You know, a 5
Right.
second or a 5-round beatdown, in my opinion, is way more impressive than a 5-second knockout. This is not to say it's not awesome to see and it's super exciting and it shoots you into stardom. It certainly did for Jorge Masvidal. But what Kamaru Usman managed to do to Tyron Woodley was so impressive that I really don't think it would be wise for him to call him out right now. I think you deal with Gilbert Burns, and then I think you got to deal with either like Leon Edwards or Colby Covington after that. I don't think it's smart to go right for Usman, but you're probably right. That is what he's gonna
He's gonna go right on that open mic. He's gonna promote his hip hop albums, and then he's gonna ask for that title shot right away. You know,
but
it's
here's
coming.
the thing: he's not gonna get it.
No.
Dana does not like him as a champion. I truly believe that. Dana does not want him as a champion. It's unfortunate because the guy's skill set is certainly there, but he's not a fan favorite. You know, even
Not at all.
he is not one of those champions that people really clung on to, right? The same happened for Demetrius Johnson, even though Demetrius Johnson was obviously one of the most dominant flyweights in the world and just a really nice, good guy. You know, he was just a super positive presence in the UFC. He never got that fan traction that he so deserved. And I guess he just wasn't compelling enough for people. I don't know. I think Tyron falls into the same boat. People really don't like his attitude. I don't think Dana likes his attitude. He's in a tough spot right now, but he's still got Gilbert Burns to deal with. So I guess he shouldn't look past Gilbert Burns. Not that he's going to, but, you know.
Another thing to think about is the cardio. Gilbert Burns has never gone 5 rounds before. I'm curious to see how he's going to do with that extra 2 rounds at the end. And Tyron, in his statement, he even mentioned that he feels pretty confident just because of Gilbert Burns' cardio and lack of experience. But every time that I've seen Gilbert Burns get tired at the 3rd round, which that's normally when he fades. Now, he doesn't get exhausted. He's not like Anthony Smith and Glover Teixeira. No, he fades a little bit, and he kind of plays it safe. Definitely backs off a bit. But I believe most of them, if not all of those, were short notice fights. And I'm not sure. Is this a short notice fight for him? Was this? I really don't know.
I mean, I think you could say every fight right now is in some way short notice. Things are so up in the air and uncertain. When I was looking at the card, I forget what website I was looking at. I could tell you in a second, but it says in an MMAmania.com. I was looking at the card, and they have an asterisk right at the bottom: fight card, bout order, and the amount of matches subject to drastic change because of the various global quarantine restrictions. So things are so uncertain right now. Training for these guys is so up in the air. I mean, everything is up in the air. You know, whether or not this fight is going to be in Nevada or Arizona was up in the air. So I think you could argue every fight is in some way short notice, or at least the notice is not where it should be here, right? I mean, things are just so uncertain right now.
He wasn't supposed to fight Woodley before all this happened, right? Wasn't Woodley fighting Leon Edwards? Or am I incorrect?
Yeah, I think Woodley was set to fight Leon Edwards in London, but then the pandemic happened.
Yes. Okay. So this technically is a short notice fight for Edwards, or not Edwards. I'm sorry, Gilbert Burns. But who knows how he's been training during all of this? He seems like the type of guy. He's come out and said that he's just always training. You know what I mean? So if that's the case, maybe he'll be okay. But I'm really curious to see how he deals with the 5 rounds and if that affects how he fights in the first 2-3 rounds. You think we're going to see a much slower Gilbert Burns? It's up in the air. Who knows?
I don't know, man. It's so hard to say how these guys have been training. Some of them have come right out and said, hey, it's been really hard. You know, things have just been so not right. My gym is closed, or I don't have my training partners that I need because everyone's home. And then some of them have said, it's fine. Things have been okay. You know, I get one-on-one time with my coach. The gym is empty, which works well for me. It's so it's so hard to say, and it's so hard to. I don't want to say these fighters are like liars or anything, but they are the kind of people to just smile and be like, everything's cool, everything's
Yeah.
fine. Like Anthony Smith, my teeth are falling out, but it's all good. Like,
This is
like
normal.
they're not complainers,
Yeah.
So
No, I agree with you.
it's hard to say for certain.
Such an interesting time in the world of mixed martial arts, isn't it?
Very interesting,
Very
very
interesting.
anxiety inducing. I kind of hate it,
You
but
never know what's going to happen next.
yeah, it's like they say in the beginning of what's that show, Pawn Star? You never know what's going to come through that door.
You never
we're
do.
we're going to be saying that at the UFC Apex on May 30th. We don't know who's going to come through that door, and who knows? Connor might show up. Maybe Ben Askren will make a return. Who knows what's going to happen?
They should bring Artem Lobov back. He'd be. Oof.
Artem, yes.
He needs to make a return to the UFC.
Apparently, Bare Knuckle FC, that should be coming back soon-ish. I don't know.
Oh man, you know how I love that. Oh, such a good contest. I am not a big fan of it, but I feel like I just haven't watched it enough to really have a good opinion on it. You know what I mean?
You gotta watch Artem fight Paulie Malagago.
Oh, I have seen that.
Guy.
That was good. I like that. But
yeah,
that might be because I don't like Paulie. I don't know.
And you love Artem because
well, imagine. Yeah, well, the card I watched was weird. Imagine if you started watching the UFC and your first fight was Francis Ngannou fighting Derek Lewis. You'd have quite an interesting opinion on MMA. You'd be like, "What is this stuff? Where am I? This is horrifying."
Oh man, yeah, that would be a rough first experience.
I gotta give it another try. Not that was a bad card. It just was the fights before Paulie were a little,
Yeah, I haven't watched much of it either. I just heard that they're planning a comeback. We'll see. I can't say that I really give a shit either way.
No.
I just want this May 30th card to happen. I want everyone to stay healthy. I want to see every day we're getting new fights and things are just constantly moving right now. Things are so, it's energized.
Spooky.
It's spooky.
It's spooky.
Very spooky. I kind of like it. I kind of hate it. It's all over the place. My emotions are all over the place right now with these fights. They have me so uncertain. Every time after a card ends, when I say every time, I mean, the 3 Jacksonville cards we had. Every morning I wake up after those fights, I go on my phone and I'm like, oh God, please, no one be sick. And I mean, that's still kind of the case because this is a virus that could take 14 days to really make itself known in your body. I'm just constantly like, oh man, who's gonna fall? I don't want it to happen, but
you never know. You never know.
The best place to go right now is the UFC Apex, Nevada. It's their home turf. They have the PI right next door. They know how to run stuff there. It's a great place to be. I'm glad they're going back, or at least they're planning to. But Big Daddy Uncle Dana, where's Fight Island? That's all I want to know.
That's what we got to know.
Where's Fight Island?
I don't think he'll ever tell us. No, he's not giving out the location.
Oh man, I'm so excited for that. Whether or not it actually happens, who the hell knows?
It better be on the beach. They're selling T-shirts already. Fight Island.
Oh yeah, that's right. They are.
Yeah, so I mean, it's definitely set in stone.
Yeah,
but where is it going to be?
Yeah, where is it? Oh, I'm excited.
Better not.
I love how he's not telling people just out of spite. He's not telling people just because he knows we want to know so bad. Classic Uncle Dana, man. What if the first fight on Fight Island, your main event, is Francis and Jon Jones?
Oh, you think he would play that? Ooh.
And then, no, here's what you do. It's International Fight Week, all right? It's July. You do 3 cards. All right? Like you did in Jacksonville. You do like Saturday, Wednesday, Saturday. Your first one, Stipe and DC3. Your second one, your Wednesday one, you do John and Francis. Your third one, you do Jorge Masvidal and Conor McGregor. Come on, Uncle Dana. Sign me up. Put me in, coach. I'm ready. Mick Maynard, Sean Shelby, give me a call. Hit me up.
This is going to be such an interesting – I feel like you mentioned the other day, how interesting would it be if we just had this surprise card I would love
Oh,
to know.
the Royal Rumble
Yes, the
card.
Royal Rumble. No fight
Yeah.
announced. Just you never know what's going to come through that door.
You
It's
never
just
know what's going to come through that door. So just to for people that don't know, that weren't present for our conversation between just you and I, my idea was basically you do like a WWE style where you know how they do the Royal Rumble where you don't know who's coming out or what's next. You do that. You tell the fighters, who they're fighting, of course, and you give them enough time to prepare and do their training camps and all that. But you don't promote it at all. You just say like mystery card, and then every fight you don't know who's coming out. Fight number one, okay, Nate Diaz and Tony Ferguson. Fight number two, these two guys, and so on and so forth. Would that ever happen? Hell no, of course not. But it's fun to think about.
I think it would be fantastic. I would
It'd
come
be,
for that. I
it'd be
would pay
kind
a
of
lot of
cool.
money for that.
Here's the thing, though. Most people won't. I don't
Yeah,
think people are going to buy a pay-per-view and they don't know the fighters on the
it
card.
depends. If they come out with a first event where it's like every single fight is a complete banger, then I mean people are going to be excited for the next one. They just can't mess up that execution. You got to come out. You got to give those good fights. Those Jon Jones versus Ngannou's, or it's just not going to work out.
Here's the thing, though. These guys don't know how to keep their mouths shut. If the UFC
Yeah.
told, like, Conor McGregor, okay, you're going to be on this surprise card. You can't tell anyone. How long do you think he's going to keep that a secret? Like 15 minutes?
Hey, they could pay him
before
a
he's
lot
on
of money
Twitter?
to keep
And
it a
he's like,
secret.
hey, guys, I'm fighting Tony Ferguson on July 11th. Oh, next day, I'm retiring. Next day, I'm back.
Thanks for the cheese.
Thanks for the cheese. Yeah, it would never happen, but it's fun to think about, But I also never thought we'd be talking about fights happening on an island like it's fucking Enter the Dragon. But hey, it looks like that's gonna happen too. So
It
let's
better
do
happen.
it, Uncle Dana.
As soon as it happens, I'm buying a T-shirt immediately. It's
Oh,
gonna be oh man.
absolutely, absolutely.
So, enough of the Fight Island talk. Let's get to our next spot here. The next fight worth talking about. Mackenzie Dern is fighting Hannah Cirrus. Who knows how you pronounce that name? Kyle, how do you pronounce her name?
Hannah Cyphers.
All right.
Yeah.
We're gonna cut this part out.
Why is this a fight you want to talk about?
All right.
Listen, man, Mackenzie hot as fuck. I agree, but I don't give a shit about this fight.
All right, we're gonna backpedal here. There's nothing about this fight. She just found out she had to make. She just found out there were weight classes in the UFC. There's no point. She's a good fighter, but
I say we leave this in. I think this is great quality content. All right, Mackenzie Dern, beautiful. The most beautiful woman in the UFC. I don't know if that's true. I'd probably still give that award to Rose Namajunas, but that's just me. Mackenzie Dern, her first fight after having a child.
How interesting. Oh, wait, no, she lost her. She had a fight after she had the child and lost.
Oh, right.
Didn't she?
That's I think you're right.
So will Hannah Cyphers continue the loss streak for Mackenzie Dern? I know this is what the people want to know, so this is why we're going over it.
I'll be honest, I don't know, and I don't care all that much either.
I don't really care either. Now what you should talk about is Mackenzie Dern going to make weight? No. Let's just get that out there.
I hope not. I hope she comes in 10 pounds over and then just ragdolls this woman and just wrestles the shit out of her like she does every time. Just blatantly cheat.
If they don't punish her severely, then why make weight? You know what I mean? Like,
a win is a incentive.
Win. No, you don't get your fight purse taken away or a percentage. That's all myths from Dana White. That doesn't happen. Well, I think we're going to wrap it up there. This has been... Well, I
right.
think we're going to wrap it up there. This has been Caffeinated Combat, talking to you about all fun things in MMA, all the hot things going on. Join us after the May 30th card on ESPN Plus, where we'll do a post-fight podcast talking
Speaking
about
of
all.
hot things, how about that Mackenzie Dern fight coming up?
Oh, man, I am excited for that one. The pants are already off. I'm in preparation.
Oh, we can't fucking say that.
Thank you all for joining us, and we'll talk to you later.
Adios.